Good evening. Professor Pat Murphy, I'd like to welcome all of you to the third Berges Lecture for 2008. Cathie Black is our speaker tonight. She's president of Hearst Magazines. There are 18 titles under her leadership, including some of the country's best-known brands, Cosmopolitan, Good Housekeeping, Harper's Bazaar, Esquire, and I don't think you need to know the rest of that. Cathy has worked hard to move Hearst into the digital age. She's built a new 125-person digital media unit focused on magazine brand extension into the digital age, from websites to online video to mobile. She is responsible for 200 magazines in 100 countries and best-selling author of this book that we'll hear about tonight, Basic Black, the essential guide for getting ahead at work, and in parentheses, and in life. And we'll hear a lot about the life part. And she'll share that with us this evening. Cathy is on the board of directors of IBM and Coca-Cola, and also the member of the board of trustees of Notre Dame. She's a true leader and pioneer in advertising and marketing. She was the first woman publisher of New York Magazine, president and publisher of USA Today, and Time Magazine has called her an exemplar of successful, fulfilled business that her readers aspire to be, and she appears annually in Forbes magazine's The Most Powerful Women in Business. Please join with me in giving a Notre Dame welcome to Cathie Black, president of Hearst Magazine. Cathy, welcome.
I don't think that's the kind of welcome a football team would get. Thank you, Professor Murphy. When Pat, I guess, emailed me a long time ago, many months ago, asking if I would do this, I was really tickled. I love being with students. I met a few earlier this evening. I love their questions, and I love their passion about whatever is going to be ahead for them. Now, I've already been told by Pat, the professor, that normally there are not a lot of questions afterward. I know you've got incredibly busy schedules, and of course a debate to watch about an hour after we finish or so. But you know, the Q&A part is always the best part, because that's when I know kind of what's on your mind. But in any event, the subject of business is something I've been I've been working for a very long time. In fact, whenever I hear the word pioneer, I get like, oh, that means I'm old. But anyway, the whole subject of business and ethics, which I know is the whole purpose and the subject matter of this class, is one that has interested me for a very long time. I care deeply about it. In a perfect world, and if you think about the world that we're living in literally right now, not about the war, but about the war on Wall Street, if you think about it, it really is not only about business and ethics, it is also about success and ethics. And in a perfect world, there probably would not be maybe one without the other. Well, we know, though, that sometimes that goes, and the crisis of the last few weeks, starting back in the summer, has certainly illustrated how things can happen unbelievably fast and in dimensions that nobody could ever have imagined. Coincidentally, I live in the same apartment building in New York City as both the chairman of Goldman Sachs and the former chairman of Merrill Lynch. Ironically, the former chairman of Merrill Lynch I now see hailing a taxi as opposed to the car that used to pick him up or his wife and children in the morning. But Lloyd Blankfein is still picked up by a car and driver. But I've barely seen him in the last 2 weeks. Sometimes we run into each other in the gym. But one of the things I also think about success is that we all have to make our own success. The best that we can do is to think about, in the words of Oprah Winfrey, about living your best life. And I know you're all at different stages in your own academic careers at this point in time, but it is the one thing that will hold true. It is not necessarily about what your parents think you should do or your partners or your spouses, but it really is what is inside of you. And here's another one. Success in one part of your life doesn't mean much without fully living your whole life. And people have asked me since Basic Black came out about literally a year ago, and I've been lucky enough to have it on 3 bestseller lists, including the Wall Street Journal and New York Times and Business Week. And the paperback came out about a week ago, and it's now, at least it was a week ago, number 14 on the New York Times paperback bestseller list. But what it seems to have sort of touched on a note, or on kind of a chord, if you will, that resonated, was it's not just about the business, but it is about the business of life. And many of you, I mean, most of you are in your early 20s, probably a few in your mid-20s. And those are the things that I would urge you to think about as you move up. Whatever career ladder you happen to choose to try to ascend, it's not only about that part of your life from the proverbial, 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, or if you're on Wall Street, 8 till 8 or 8 till 3 a.m., but it really is about how do you sort of figure out what do you want as you kind of move forward. I've kind of coined it having the 360-degree life. In fact, I don't know whether you just saw the cover of the book from Pat, but the reason that I wanted to put end in life down in the book, I mean, this is not about, Jack Welch or Jeff Immelt and their business success stories. It really is about trying to help. And when I started the book, or when I started thinking about the book, just because I kind of came of age at a time when doors were just cracking open ever so slightly for women, I really wanted to give back as sort of a portable mentor, if you will. You can stick it in a tote bag, or you can put it on your desk or by the side of your bed or whatever. In fact, people have come up to me over the last year, especially young women, and they've got like 30 little Post-it notes on the side as though it literally has kind of become their Bible. When I first told my then boss that I was doing a book, he had a very skeptical look on his face. And he said, Hearst, the company or the corporation, is privately held, and they don't tend to kind of put their executives out in front very much. Our editors, yes, but not senior executives. And I said, well, think of it this way, Vic. You have twin 28-year-old daughters. And I think that by the time someone is about 28, is really, maybe 25 if they're more mature, if they've gotten onto a particular path. But I think it's really around 28, especially for a young woman, that she begins thinking about how much do I want? That phrase that was it for my generation was, can we have it all? I like to say that yes, you can have it all, but not all on the same day. And that I think has been a great challenge for a lot of women. But I enjoy the role, or I appreciate the role, I should say, having been a mentor to a lot of young women, maybe not literally, but also figuratively, because it is about trying to figure out what is inside you that you want to be successful, as opposed to just the external manifestation of success in the business world. And I think that, kind of wraps into culture and ethics and values also. So I hope that others can learn a number of things from what I talk about tonight, but also about what is the essence of living a life that certainly the values that you are taught in this great university, and how you keep those in balance as you hit, another life, if you will, along the way. And I think the pursuit of a successful, full life applies not just to work, but I call it the 360-degree life. It is a life that blends work and family and absolutely fun and friends and faith and community and commitment. Commitment certainly here to service, but everything that really we find fulfilling. Because success in life is not just about work. It is critical to our spirits and our souls. It is in the search to be, I'd say, multidimensional. As humans, we need support. We need variety, and we need a zest for life. And yes, I do mean zest, because we work very hard. So why not enjoy it? One reason I know this is because I was pretty much a workaholic in my 20s and early 30s. I came of age, as I said, just kind of when the women's movement was just beginning to kind of really hit the ground running, and doors were beginning to open. But it was certainly not much more than a crack. So we know in order to succeed and to move up that ladder, as women then, and I'd suggest still women today, we had to work harder. We had to prove ourselves over and over again in order to get promoted or recognized. And it took a toll on many people's personal lives. As one boyfriend said to me at a point in our relationship, he said, Cathy, you're married to your job. I said, no, actually, Harry, I'm not in love with you. It's also true, though, that I loved my early jobs. I was really lucky. I had, like many people, I didn't have a complete career track. I was interested in the media. I did not grow up in the media business. I actually grew up in Chicago on the South Side, and my brother went to Notre Dame, and my husband went to Notre Dame. He was an undergrad as well as he is a double domer. He went to law school here as well. He grew up in South Bend. But I was lucky because I knew that I was interested in publishing or media or advertising or communications, although we kind of didn't even call it communications back then. But somewhere along the way, I kind of figured out that happiness is more important to success than success is to happiness. And that's worth thinking about and maybe just jotting down, because an awful lot of people chase that success word and think it will bring them inner fulfillment and happiness, and frankly, it really doesn't. That's one of, I would say, a success secret, because they're not exactly success secrets as they are strategies. I live in the world of magazine cover lines. You heard that we publish 18 or 19 magazines in the United States, a zillion of them around the world. And a cover line, I'm sure most of you have bought a magazine at some point, a cover line is that little teaser that you see on the cover that compels you, I hope, to plunk that magazine down and say, I want that. So the word secret on the cover of a magazine, these are 3 that we publish, is important. On a magazine cover, it's kind of a magnet. But there's, of course, other magnet words in cover lines, like money, thin, win, lose, as in weight. But what do you think is the biggest draw of all? Well, you heard that we publish Cosmo. So yes, sex, no surprise there, that it finds itself on Esquire, and yes, Redbook. Would you be surprised if I told you the Cosmopolitan is the #1 young woman's magazine in the world? It publishes in 62 countries. And I love to tell this. Are there any Russians in the room, by any chance? The Russian edition of Cosmo sells 1 million copies a month, which makes it the largest young women's magazine in all of Western Europe. Pretty astonishing. It is a Bible. And it's actually a playbook for the men that read it as well. They always say, now I know what she's thinking. But enough about something that we know Notre Dame students never, ever even think about. At least that's what my husband told me. A couple of more success secrets that bosses never tell you, but they should. Number 1, take risks that are calculated, but not crazy. So what does she mean by that? Well, there's a story about a monkey who reaches into a hole to grab a nut. He wants to get that nut out of the hole and into his mouth. But he can't get the fist out of the hole without opening up his claws and letting, therefore, go of the net. What happens? He stays stuck. I've learned that you have to let go of all of the safe nuts. Not nuts as in crazy nuts, but nuts. When you risk doing that, you're on your way to finding something better. Who knows? Maybe there's a whole trove of nuts out there waiting for you. My first opportunity to take a calculated, not crazy risk came in my first job. I was an advertising sales assistant at a magazine, a peon kind of job. A year into it, my boss, who was probably give or take 10 or 12 years older than I was, quit. The minute that I heard she was leaving, I wanted to pitch for her job. I'm surprised I waited that long. The publisher, which is the top business role at a magazine, the publisher was a guy who had been in the magazine business, frankly, probably longer than I had been alive. Of course, I thought he was old. He was probably 40. However, that's old to you guys, I know. I told him that I wanted to talk about this job. I had a grand total of about 1.5 years of experience, but somehow I convinced him that I was ready. Okay, he said after a short interview. And then he added that my salary would go up slightly to reflect my new job responsibilities. Well, yeah, of course. But I said to myself, wrong. I knew how little I made. And I had a sense as about how much my boss made. And it was a lot more than he was offering me. Now, what could I do? I could have just thanked him politely and taken the raise, as women tend to do. Gloria Steinem, with whom I worked at Ms. Magazine a zillion years ago, once said that women had a terminal case of gratitude. Brazenly, I told him that I knew what Phyllis was earning and that I thought I ought to be paid the same thing. After all, I would be doing the same work with the same responsibilities. Was that nerve or what? The publisher clearly thought so as his face sort of got very flush, maybe even lipstick red, although I'm not so sure that talking about lipstick right now in this election year and pigs and all of that is such a good analogy. But what inexperienced 23-year-old asked for a bigger salary minutes after getting her first ever promotion. Minutes, literally. Didn't I know that moving into a higher position that didn't guarantee that I'd make the same salary as the person leaving? Actually, I didn't know that. But all of you here, you should know that. You don't automatically step into that salary range. Often it's so that you can move up. But it wouldn't have mattered. Not because I was fearless, though evidently I must have come off like that, because even if I had known, aiming higher was a risk that just made sense to me. The upside was obvious, making more money. The downside was what? That the publisher would say no, that he'd think less of me, or even rescind the promotion. Plus, I was earning such a paltry little sum, he probably was embarrassed. But think of it this way. I'd already gotten the job. If I didn't take the risk and ask for a higher salary, there was zero chance that I would get it. Or in the words of, I think it was Wayne Gretzky who said, for sure you lose 100% of the shots that you never take. In the end, I didn't get as much money as I asked for, but I did get more than the publisher first offered me. So nothing lost, something gained, and it was the ideal outcome for taking a risk, a calculated risk. For the women in the room, I would suggest also, and probably for a lot of the guys as well, the idea of negotiating is often a painful experience. It feels awkward. You feel kind of pushy. But there is nothing wrong with it. Think of it like a little game. You give and you take, and you can kind of keep coming back. I'm negotiating with an executive right now to take a transfer. And we've been back and forth on all of the things that he wants and all the things that we will or will not do. But it's okay. So keep that in mind. Another secret. The worst case scenario is rarely as bad as you think it might turn out to be. In fact, failing can lead to colossal success. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about all of the people this week who will lose their jobs or have lost their jobs. I'm not talking about Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae or Lehman or Morgan or you name it. I am talking, that's a familiar picture. Do you know who that is? J.K. Rowling, the author behind Harry Potter's astounding global success. 7 years after her college graduation, she was a divorced, single parent with no job. She was, in her own words, and I quote, as poor as it is possible to be in modern Britain without being homeless. I was set free, she said, because my greatest fear had already been realized. I was still alive. I had a daughter whom I adored. I had an old typewriter and a big idea. So rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. Some famous, very successful folks failed or dropped out of college. Now, I hope Professor Murphy, you'll forgive me for that, he wants you all to graduate, for sharing this information. Madonna, Ralph Lauren, and Bill Gates' parents were probably hysterical when they said, later to school. George Washington had the equivalent of a grade school education. Now, I'm not suggesting that you leave South Bend without that diploma. But what I am saying is that there is an upside to failure. If people tell you that they've never failed or made a mistake, they are not telling you the truth. I personally learned this by making what some would call a bonehead career move. I prefer to think of it as an interesting couple of months. After nearly a decade of living in New York City, I decided that I wanted a new adventure. Film director Francis Ford Coppola was publishing a new San Francisco-based magazine called City. I wanted to work there, even though I knew it was professionally risky. New York is the capital of the media universe, and why would I move to San Francisco, a pretty and charming city, but certainly not the center of publishing? I was starting to make a name for myself in New York. I'd be leaving important contacts, my friends and colleagues thousands of miles behind me. But I fully expected that Coppola's magazine would take off and my new life to keep soaring. And was I ever wrong? 3 months after I moved to San Francisco, having hauled all of my furniture out there on my own ticket and signed a year's lease on an apartment, I just knew instinctively there was no way the magazine was going to make it. Not enough advertising and not enough circulation. And it was a weekly magazine, so it was going through money very quickly. 2 months later, I was so sure that it would fold that I resigned and decided to do what any young woman, fancy-free, without any responsibilities. I went to Sun Valley and went skiing. Sure enough, while I was there, a colleague called to tell me that the magazine was history. Not only that, but the staff had learned the news from a note literally posted on the front door. The note said that the last issue had been printed and they were no longer employed. Kind of like that episode in Sex and the City when Carrie's boyfriend broke up with her with a Post-it note. Well, I'm glad I'm an optimist, because otherwise this would have been a pretty bad worst-case scenario. I was stuck in a place brimming with charm, but no job or job prospects for me. At least I didn't want to stay long enough to find out if that was really true. Remember, this is all pre-Silicon Valley, pre-the internet, pre-Google, and pre-Yahoo. So I started calling everyone that I knew in New York right away to announce that I was returning. I was able to convince the people of the magazine that I had recently left to create a new job for me, one with greater responsibility than the one I had left. So I actually ended up going back to a better job than what I had left. That may have been pure luck, but I've never seen the California adventure as a failure. And even though I have worked for Rupert Murdoch, he once asked me if I didn't consider it the biggest mistake of my life. And I said to him no, that I thought it had been a great learning experience. I had scratched an itch to move out west. I made some valuable contacts and friends. I enjoyed 6 months in San Francisco, and I learned a lesson. And it was a positive lesson. Because we think lessons can only come from disappointment. Well, of course I was disappointed that the magazine didn't make it. But I learned from it. Maybe you gain by taking an independent action. Maybe you meet great people that you would never have known otherwise that can help you going forward. Maybe you also acquire new self-knowledge about yourself. Are you the person who wants a small company where there's more risk, or a large company where there's potentially more security? There's always discovery in disappointment. Now, you won't see it if you torture yourself on what didn't work out. Focus instead what might have been, what could you have corrected, but also what you learned and how you can benefit from that knowledge. Never stop learning. This is a perfect environment to talk about that. Life in an information glut and swirling media world demands that we must keep up. There's a new language connecting the world now. We talked about this earlier tonight at dinner. We must stay current in it. Your generation knows this because you have grown up with it. Mine didn't. Here's what I mean. I don't think my kids literally know that I wrote a book. To them, it's Mom's 80,000-word Facebook page. I didn't dream starting out that there'd ever come a day in publishing when I would spend 20 to 30% of my time on media technology, some of it disruptive technology, some of it a challenge, certainly to the newspaper industry and possibly to the magazine industry. I always love asking groups of people, since I do, as I mentioned earlier, work in a very large corporation. We own 12 newspapers outright and parts of another 78. How many people here read a newspaper? How many people here who raised their hands bought that newspaper or read it in the library? That's the challenge to the newspaper industry. Because what we get in terms of advertising revenue online, because it's obviously free information, is about 1 cent on the dollar in terms of the traditional printed newspaper. Our newspaper colleagues work across the hall from me, where I work in the Hearst building in New York City, and I see them slumped over the conference table trying to figure out the future of newspapers literally on a daily basis. My 17-year-old daughter, Allison, who is a junior in boarding school in Connecticut, said to me not long ago, a few months ago, "Mom, email is for old people." That was crushing. She's so sweet. Your generation shrinks complex transactions to less than 140-word text messages that flash in real time across borders and oceans. I think it's an astonishing and very exciting world that we have found ourselves in. There's no end in sight to new knowledge. I said to a group of our editors and publishers just literally a couple of days ago, as we, like any company today, is trying to grapple with what is this year going to end like, more importantly, what is 09 and 010 going to look like. I said, you know, we cannot be afraid of risk and we cannot fear change, but we must reorganize and rethink for what this very difficult 18 months, which we would suggest is ahead of us in terms of readership, in terms of advertising. As we got to the fourth quarter of this year, our advertising spigots were like they just turned off from our clients. And a lot of people kept saying to me, is it because the advertising has all shifted to the internet? And I said, actually not the case. It's just that advertisers are as scared as any other company. You think about the automotive industry in Detroit, which will have the worst year this year since 1962. And this has come cumulatively. The retailers, the numbers that have gone into bankruptcy already, the ones if they have a very bad Christmas, which they are inevitably going to have a very bad Christmas, because it's only October 1, and Macy's has already put its Christmas stuff up, and its toys are on sale on October 2nd. Because America is maxed out on its credit cards already, which means Christmas has to be cash, which is probably not going to happen. But I have said to all of our editors and publishers, we have to look at this as an opportunity and not be terrified about thinking about literally a new world order. There is no such thing as learning enough. Success in the business world or also in your personal life means keeping it constant and going. Oop, hit the wrong one. Loyalty isn't just for dogs. When we think of loyalty, we usually think of our family, our friends, our school. We used to be loyal employees, and I'm sure at some point you will talk about this in some of your business courses. That whole covenant would appear to be broken. I'm not only talking about Wall Street, but I'm talking about all the changes that have happened in the last decade or even less than that. People used to go to a company years and years ago and spend 20 years there or 30 years ago. That's probably never going to be the kind of career path that most of you in this room, now you may not even aspire to have it, but it is a covenant that used to be, this company will take care of you. It's quite different today. That also comes to values and ethics and what you stand for. But it doesn't mean that you have to stick to a job no matter what, or do something unethical because some boss told you that you had to do that, or to not blow the whistle on corruption. We should thank God for the whistleblowers of the world. They are the people who let us know that tobacco companies knew cigarettes were addictive and that some additives could cause cancer. And of course there was Enron, probably the most famous case, but also the FAA hushing up safety problems at several airlines, torture at Abu Ghraib. And just think about right now what is going on in China with this incredible situation with melamine, some 50,000 infants having been hospitalized because the safety standards just aren't in place. It's pretty astonishing and happening a little bit here in the United States. Now, I want to be clear. Loyalty is not enabling a wrong to continue because it is your employer or your country. Here's the way that I see it. Loyalty is when people can count on you to stand by them in good times and bad, and to tell the truth. The truth hurts, but it is still the truth. That appeals to you, your family, in a college atmosphere, in a work atmosphere. Years ago at Hearst, we had a wonderful magazine editor, very popular, by the name of Liz Tilberis. She had come from England to rebuild Harper's Bazaar into a leading fashion magazine, and she was more valuable to us than diamonds. She was charming, she was adorable, she was loved by the fashion world, which is a crazy and bizarre world. Nobody could work harder or be more loyal to Hearst than Liz was, or her friends to herself. The first line in her book, or the first sentence in her book read, "It should have been the most fantastic night in my life. I'd been in New York for 6 months. My husband and I were having a party. Celebrities were coming through the door. The waiters were passing champagne. The candles were on. But earlier that morning, I'd been diagnosed stage 3 ovarian cancer." She worked through surgery and chemo. She used to proof the magazine's pages literally in her hospital bed. She came to the office feeling horrible more days than not. We didn't expect that. We would never have asked or demanded that she perform those tasks, but no way were we going to fire her or retire her. The job was hers until the end. One time, there was a young woman at the company at the time who very much wanted her job. She was a very high-profile editor herself. And our CEO, Frank Bennick, said, "No, I'm not going to guarantee you Liz's job, period." He wouldn't even say until her death, but we knew that her death was relatively imminent. We had made a promise to Liz that the job was hers for her life. We wouldn't have dreamed of denying her that loyalty. The other woman quit the company pretty much in a huff and moved on. Liz died just literally about 3 months later. Ironically, the person who left has never been as successful had she been patient enough to wait out 3 or 4 months. Yes, we lost a talented editor over that, but we kept our loyalty to Liz and especially to her family. Was it worth it? Yes. It took us a long time to rebuild the magazine, but it didn't matter. It was the right thing to do. Which brings me to number 5. The ethical decision is always the right decision. Frank Bennick is the longtime CEO of the Hearst Corporation. I was at a luncheon a few years ago when he was being honored in the ballroom of the Waldorf with probably, 700 or 800 people, many of them being big time hot dogs in the media business. And one of the men, when giving a commentary about Frank, said, and I've never forgotten it, he said to this audience of esteemed people, he said, a handshake from Frank Bennick is better than any signature on a corporate contract. It's worth remembering, it's not only about things big, it's also about things small. It's about things in business, it's about things in your own personal life. Oprah Winfrey is an icon for a lot of reasons, but besides being famous, she's also an example of how ethics can inform your work. When she endorsed a book, this goes back a few years ago, that turned out to be less than truthful, in fact, packed full of lies, it was called A Million Little Pieces by James Frey. She went on the air because he had been on her show. She went on the air later to apologize to her audience. Then she put him on her show to question him why he had lied in his book. When Oprah found out that an employee at the school that she had just built in South Africa a couple of years ago had had a terrible abuse incident, she flew there, changed management, and brought each of the hand-selected 150 pupils from tiny little communities and villages in South Africa who were chosen because they showed potential to live beyond their very often dire circumstances. She gave each of them a cell phone so that they could be in touch with their families. The situation truly broke her heart. She had enormous publicity over it, but she cared so deeply about the covenant that she had with these girls and with their parents or their mothers or their fathers, about bringing them sometimes hundreds of miles away, from their own home, that she wanted them to restore their truth and their confidence. That's what Oprah stands for. That's what she is all about. In the magazine, there's a monthly column on ethics called Now What Do I Do? I love the column in the New York Times Magazine section by Randy Cohen called Ethics. I read it every Sunday, but there are tons of examples. For example, no animal testing at a growing list of companies like The Body Shop, contributing to community causes like Target. They give 5% of their pre-tax profits to good causes. They estimate that it comes to about $3 million a week to education, the arts, and social services. Paul Newman, recently deceased unfortunately, but Newman's own line of popcorn and salad dressings and other high kind of premium items, since he started that company some 20 years ago, all of the profits have gone to charity. Many companies are trying to save the planet. Many of you, I'm sure, have gone to New Orleans to try to help build New Orleans. When Hearst built a new company headquarters in New York 2 years ago, we made it green. I must admit it wasn't our idea. It was the architect that we chose, a well-known British architect by the name of Lord Norman Foster. It was his idea to make it the greenest building in New York, which until the Bank of America topped its building a few months ago, we were the greenest building in New York, but we are a gold LEED certified building. Our tower was built with mostly recycled steel. The wood is from protected forest. We collect and recycle rainwater on our roof. We compost our garbage. And for our young people, it is a thrill to be in an environmentally sound and very modern and contemporary space. So ethical practices can mean about trying to give back to the environment as well as do good things in work and in life. So this is where I think business and ethics kind of come together. So it's not only going to be about what you learn literally in this course, because ethics is not about a sign that's posted on an employee bulletin board or on a little card that employees can carry in their wallets. It's about the things that you do day in and day out. It's also about hard decisions. It's about sometimes being in an uncomfortable situation, which will put you at a very difficult spot sometimes. But my view on life has always been, whenever possible, it is to take the high road. Ethics is not that sign that's going to be posted somewhere. Ethics are within you. It is the value system that your parents gave to you as a young person. And hopefully it is carried with you as you get tested through life as you move along, or even here, I'm sure, with certain situations. So let me conclude by repeating my core belief about success and how it ties into ethics and values. It is about having a great life. It doesn't mean only about having a great life as in having fun, but it does mean really thinking about the whole world of your life. Ask yourselves, at every time of life, are you getting what you need out of work and play? There's no thing wrong with changing your direction. There are many times when each and every one of you will wonder, why am I doing what I am doing? And think that's okay too. But try to keep in mind that life outside your work needs nurturing and replenishing. What do you choose and what do you lose? You know, it's not success if it doesn't make you feel good in a good way. It's also about valuing yourself by your aspirations and not limiting yourself by your limitations. So what I wish for you is a good life and a full life and the best success that there is in work and in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. I'd like to open it to questions.
Yes.
I think we have to.
You mentioned that you have kids, right?
Just a sec. Yes, I do. Sorry. Yes, I do.
I guess the question, like you mentioned, I have to be about 28 myself. How did you balance being such a successful professional and having children without neglecting them?
I'm asked that question. Oops. I'm asked that question. I think it's because I got two on. Hold on. That's better? Yeah. I'm asked that question a lot. And here's my approach. I think if you do want to throw your hat into the ring, or the proverbial go for the brass ring, it is understanding that you can have it all, but not on the same day. Now, that's kind of trite. But for me, it was understanding that if you do want to be on a fast track, others have to help you. And some women and men are able to do that, and some just can't. Years ago, a young woman said to me, well, how did you give our kids are both adopted, but not that that matters, but how did you, give a 4-week-old infant over to a nanny? And she kind of had tears in her eyes, and she was pregnant. And I said, I think you're really asking me that question because you already know the answer. So for me, it was a mother-in-law that helped out, a sister-in-law that helped out, a nanny that we trusted with our lives, and Some days are better than others. I mean, some days it truly all falls apart and is a disaster, for sure. But, you know, that's life, too. But it can happen. I mean, I admire women who have gone to Wall Street, which I think is an incredible pressure cooker. So, I mean, I would say that choosing a career based on how much you want to put into it is also worth really sort of exploring. I mean, I've always traveled. My kids don't know any different, and I would say that they seem fine. I always said I thought if they had a significant problem, you know, we would you know, kind of change direction, if you will, obviously. My husband has been very encouraging of my success, and to the men in the room, I would just plant this little seed. I've said over the years that there's a huge difference between being accepting of what a woman is doing and being encouraging of it. Because if you are only accepting it, it means then that she still has two jobs, the real job and the house job. And men who are excited and appreciative and encouraging of their wives' or partners' aspirations make for a much better situation. And, you know, at different times, I've made more money than my husband has for years. It's just not an issue with us. But those are things that are worth conversation and come with maturity as well. But I guess, you know, to come full circle back to your question, as they say, it can be done. Anyone else?
How was your experience, and I don't like the word pioneer, but how was your experience as a pioneer for women in business? How to influence or shape your role on the board of trustees?
I was asked is how were my experiences early on, and how did that help shape my role as a trustee? Let me answer kind of in two parts. I've always taken my professional career very seriously because I knew, like some of the older women that might be in the room tonight, I knew that if I succeeded, it was going to make it perhaps slightly easier for that next wave to come in. So I have loved what I've done, but I've always taken it with a degree of responsibility that there was, you know, I am where I am partially by luck and circumstances, but there's an awful lot of women right behind me who, for whatever reason, might not have been in quite that spot. So I wanted them to succeed. When I started working, there used to be something called the Queen Bee Syndrome. It was a long time ago. And that generally meant that a particular woman was the only woman at the conference table, if you will. And she'd worked so hard to get there, and for sure made probably half then of what the guys were making, that she didn't want any women sort of in her own circle, because it was kind of a reverse form of, you know, I like this, I like being the one and only. I always thought it was completely the opposite, and it was just completely backwards. That as we could shape the discussion, shape the format, shape what the room looked like, it was going to be a different set of opinions, and that would make for better business decision making. In terms of Notre Dame, I've been on the board a very long time, I think since like 1992. The thrill, of course, for me personally, is seeing where women have gotten to in the university, Dean. You know, and moving ahead, we know we still have a ways to go, but to see diversity be a real thing here, to see, I think, I know it's approximately 50-50 women versus men. When my brother went here, that was not the case. Women weren't in the undergraduate program. So I hope that I hope that my contribution to the board is to, you know, bring diversity of thought and diversity of experience. Yes.
Have you found that making ethical decisions in your work, that you found allies in unlikely places and been able to forge relationships with people that you wouldn't have initially thought to turn to because of their ethical background as well?
I can't think of a specific experience when that would be true. But, you know, one of the things I think that we all learn as we move ahead, and especially for those of you who will go into companies, is that you do need, well, it doesn't even matter that it be a company. It wouldn't matter whether it's a law firm or a charitable organization. You need to form constituencies. And, you know, when I went to USA Today, I later on thought to myself, I was there for about 7 years as president and then publisher. We worked like dogs. I mean, it was before 24/7 was invented as a phrase, but imagine just launching a daily newspaper that's available at 6 o'clock in the morning by satellite technology at every newsstand imaginable. It was quite a heroic undertaking. Sometimes I think we're so busy that, sort of with such direct focus, that we don't build the constituencies that are necessary for us to move ideas and thoughts or projects or whatever forward. And, you can be in an ethical situation. I talk about this a little bit in the book. I don't go into great detail, but, this has happened to many women and men. My boss at one point was having an affair with somebody who worked in my department. I mean, that's not an easy one to sort of work through. But it's sort of like you have to choose your battles, and that was one I was not going to win. So, the HR department knew about it, but they couldn't do anything about it either. So in time, it sort of ran its course. But we're all going to run into situations like that in one form or another that are very uncomfortable. But there are times when you're going to want to absolutely put your foot down on something, hopefully, that seems to be really of significance and importance. And there's other times when you kind of back off. Yes.
In your speech, you mentioned that happiness is one from success and success is happiness. I was wondering what advice you give to college students that who are surrounded by this education and to succeed.
What I think the message there is success has to be defined individually. But the inner part of that is it's not about just chasing the title, the salary, the lifestyle. And that's really what I mean about, because that does not necessarily make you a fulfilled person. And so it really is about trying to decide what is going to fulfill me, and it may not, or generally it is not only a salary, a title, a perk. So that's kind of what I mean by about the connection between happiness and success. Yes?
Cathy, just actually two questions. I'm going to be a hog. The first thing is that there is a sense that overall the idea of ethics or ethical standards are slipping. That a lot of people feel like, most things are relative, most people do things, and if you're not caught, it's okay. And it's not a big thing, just slippery slope type of thing. How do you deal with that in an organization? And then the second thing is you are into adventures. So what is your next adventure? What do you want it to be?
Well, I'll try the first one first. I had the opportunity to play golf with former President Clinton. Number one, I was in way over my head. But I observed something that day that I've never forgotten. He normally, if you play golf, you might take one practice shot. People would really not like you to take two. And multiple ones, they certainly don't want. But I noticed his aide-de-camp keep tossing balls down. And, great shot, Mr. President, great shot, Mr. President. I'm thinking, that's his fifth try, for God's sakes. Or a putt that was 4 feet long. That's good. That's good. So I had this little window into what it must be like for one's whole life when people are always kind of just pushing aside the reality of what is truth and always saying, great, good. Sometimes people say that we have taught our kids that, every child gets not a statue, trophies, an award or a trophy, so all 20 little soccer players or whatever. And, that whole sense of, I remember when my son was first cut from a team, it's like, oh, I can't believe it. Like, why wouldn't they have everybody on the team? I mean, he's like, I don't know what he was, 11 or something. And yet, these are the things that we sort of realize in life. It's not, all wins. And you have your losses. So I think it is really trying to keep reminding people of, it sounds a little trite. No, we can't do that. It's just wrong, whether that's the contract or whether it's a this or it's a price on something. Sometimes we get screwed when we'll have charged an advertiser a particular price or somebody made a little deal and, they remind us that, well, that's what I was told, and if it's all right, if that's what you were told, then, we're going to have to stick by that. But it's hard. I mean, I'm not saying, and I do think that ethics have slipped. Whether it's that people don't want to put the time into teaching it, as parents to children, or as it, kind of moves up the food chain. I remember a long time ago, I was talking to a business class at UVA when I was in Washington, and this a reporter had a special assignment to get her MBA, and she wanted to switch from reporting into business reporting. And I remember one of the other people in this, it was more like a seminar, there were like 12 young people, and they said, the business reporter said something to the effect of, well, would you accept, or could I accept a car as a reporter? And I said, of course not. It's ridiculous. You're not supposed to do that, or I was reading about someone's portfolio, and, that like the Wall Street Journal reporters, I believe, are not allowed to invest in, they sign, pieces of paper and all of that, and I'm sure over the years there have been situations like that. But I was surprised, and I said to her, I was reminded once when I was the ad director of New York Magazine a long time ago, and this young salesman was working late one night, and he had gotten an ad in from a liquor store, and then a couple of days later he said, I got a whole case of wine from that store. I said, Jack, guess what's going to happen? Did you promise the liquor store good positioning in the next issue, as in your ad will be next to the wine column? He said, well, yeah, because I figured I could work that out with the editorial production department. I said, well, the reason he has sent you that case of wine is that he is going to expect that every single time his ad runs. And the first time that it runs and he doesn't get that position, he is going to be on the phone screaming like a banshee, which he was about 4 weeks later. Of course, by this time, Jack had drunk all of the wine, so the wine was long gone. But you kind of run this. I probably should have said to him that night, send it back, because then when things happen, which they inevitably will, then you're not there with this guy screaming on the phone to you. But, we live and we live. And now, of course, I've talked so long, I can't remember your second question. Sorry. My next venture. I don't know. I could retire now, but I love what I do. And so I would wish for all of you that you end up in a position that you really do love what you do. I don't exactly, dance down the hallway to work, but, the media business is full of interesting people, curious people, smart people. Every day is different. We've always got new projects. We're launching a magazine in a week with the Food Network. Any Food Network fans here? Oh, yay! Buy it on the newsstand, please. I feel like it kind of keeps me young. But that's not to say that, I don't look at it at a time and think, there will be other things. I just don't know exactly what that would be.
Did you ever consider politics?
I was asked by the dean, would I ever consider politics? I've been asked that a lot. But when I think of what Hillary Clinton has had to do, I don't want all those chicken dinners on Saturday night, or 5 of them. I just don't want to do that any longer. It would have been interesting or challenging, years and years ago, but it's not something I don't think that I would do now. I would do an appointed position, but I wouldn't want to have to run for office. Basically all they do all the time is raise money, which is really tough.
Well, Cathy, thanks so much.
Thank you.
It was a very inspirational
Thank you very much.
speech.
Thank you.
And I forgot to say when I introduced her, I've read this book and I highly recommend it to all of you. It's an excellent book, and we only saw the tip of the iceberg tonight. And just a reminder, our next Berges lecture is November 11th. Joe Lockery, who's president of Cummins Engine from Indiana here, will be our speaker at 7 p.m. that night. Thank you, and thanks again, Cathy. I'm sure she'd be willing to answer questions if anybody would like to ask her.